Good afternoon, my respected lecturer, Dr. Amizam, and my fellow classmate. I am Lim Sau Loon, metric number 264080, and I would like to present the 5 major tenets of the new classicism. Well, the modern phase Chicago School of Economics began in 1946, while Milton Friedman joined the faculty. Later in 1948, he firmly established the school unique identity together with George Stigler. Gary Becker, Robert Lucas, and other several prominent economists of Chicago have continued the tradition. Chicago School perspective is a variant of neoclassicism and is referred to as New Classicism. Moving on to the historical background, many of the important developments in economic thought since the time of Marshall stimulated or at least rationalized greater government involvement in the economy. For example, first, pure ideas of externalities implied that the government could improve the allocation of the resources through selective taxes and subsidies. Second, Robinson's theory of monopsony suggests that the government should establish a minimum wage and promote labor unionism. Thirdly, the theories of the imperfect competition and the monopoly power led many to conclude that the government regulatory role in the economic ought to be expanded. And fourth, the economic theory of market socialism convinced many that the state could just as efficient allocate the resources and produce goods and services as the private enterprises. And fifth, widely accepted theories of the economic development implies that the government was the only available instrumentality for breaking the vicious cycle of poverty in developing countries. Keynesian premised that the government should also use the monetary, fiscal, and income policies to stabilize the economy. However, the member of Chicago School opposed this entire line of reasoning. Chicago School tried to maintain and strengthen the classical, marginalist, and neoclassical tradition, which is laissez-faire system, at a time when it had diminished popularity because of the Keynesian revolution. And there are 5 major tenets of the Chicago School, which are optimizing behavior, observe prices and wages in general tend to be good approximation of their long-run competitive one, mathematical orientation, rejection of Keynesianism, and limited governments. Firstly, optimizing behavior. The neoclassicism principles state that people attempt to maximize their well-being, where their every decision is to maximize the behavior. The basic economic unit is individual. Individual could combine into a larger units, which is family, political interest group, business organization, as a way to achieve and gain from the specialization as an exchange. People often make rational choices, although such choices do not always produce the expected result, since the benefit and the cost are uncertain. Therefore, they seek for information, but only to the point where the marginal benefit from the extra information equal to the marginal cost of obtaining it, which is MB equal to MC. It shows that the consumer, workers, and the firm respond to the monetary incentives and disincentives. Next is observe prices and wages in general tend to be good approximations of their long-run competitive one. Prices and wages reflect the opportunity cost to the society at the margin. Divergences between the actual and competitive prices caused by the monopoly and monopoly are in general inconsequential. Monopoly prices persist in the long run only in instances where the government block the competitive entry. And even in those instances, competition will eventually generate new products and technology that will undermine the monopolist's position. Besides, establishing a clear property right and encouraging private negotiation can minimize the externalities. Institutional agreements like seniority pay, large executive salaries, union contracts, and so forth that on surface appear to set the wages and prices independently of the market forces usually exist because of the efficiency. Furthermore, the Chicago School relies heavily on the mathematical theorizing using both Marshallian partial equilibrium method and Walrasian's general equilibrium approach. The school also rejects Keynesianism. They conclude that the economy is self-adjusting and regulating, with minor fluctuation being self-limiting. Besides, several recession and depression result from inappropriate monetary policies, not from autonomous change in spending. Changes in the money stock can cause the direct changes in the more nominal GDP rather than operating exclusively through financial interest rate. Furthermore, fiscal policy is generally ineffective unless accomplished with the changes in money supply even in the presence of the rational expectation. And the theory of seller or cost push inflation is erroneous because of the inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Lastly, the limited governments. Governments are inherently ineffective as an agent of achieving objectives that can cause the sacrifice through the private exchange. Government officials have their own objectives that they seek to optimize and therefore inevitably divert a portion of the resources at their disposal to purpose other than the benefit of the taxpayer. Besides, rather than being in the public interest, the government regulation normally benefits those who seek the regulation or those who learn to marshal it to the private advantage. That's all from me. Thank you.
Good day everyone, my name is Kok Seong, metric number is 263297. Today I'm going to present about whom did the Chicago School benefit or seek to benefit, how was the Chicago School useful, valid, or correct in its time, which tenets of the Chicago School became lasting contribution, and lastly, to present about the Chicago School economist George J. Stigler. Without further ado, let us start our presentation. Whom did the Chicago School benefits or seeks to benefit? And number one is the society at large. The advocates of Chicago School convince the general population and elected officials in the competitive market believe the less interference by the governmental regulation can in turn to maximize the individual and the collective economic well-being. And the second is the corporate interest. The corporate interest believe the less governmental regulation and the paperwork can increase the competitive outcome by providing information about the choices from the consumer. And the third is the high-income groups. The high-income groups believe the tax system should induce in the raise in the revenues and instead of the redistribute incomes. And on the other hand, they have the groups and individuals who rely on the government subsidies, employment regulation, or special legislation stand to lose by the political acceptance of Chicago School policy. And for the example, the farmers, the farm interests that advocate government price support and subsidies have opposed the Chicago's perspective. the union or professionals group that represent government employees also have strongly voiced about their displeasure with the Chicago-style economies. Next, let us discuss about how the Chicago school become the valid, useful, and correct in its time. Number one, preserve the legacy of classical, marginalist, and neoclassical economies. The Chicago school maintained and strengthened the marginalist tradition and at a time when it had diminished popularity. Chicago School helps preserve the legacy of marginalist and classical economies during the dominating of the Keynesian economics in the economic school. Economists can turn to microeconomics analysis to expand their insight into the issues of the days, including those the previous period were domain of the macroeconomic theories. And for the example, the analysis of unemployment now includes the emphasis on the microeconomic theories of job search and intertemporal substitution between work and leisure. And number two, keeping alive of the monetary view of Fisher. During the 1970s and the 1980s, there's the rapid inflation and caused the national attention from the Keynesianism unemployment to the concern of the Fisher and Friedman inflation. When the inflation and unemployment happen at the same time, we call it as the stagflation. The stagflation led many the Keynesian call income policy, although they acknowledge the policy would produce the side effect and will affect the efficiency. The neoclassics arguing that the long-run trade-off between the inflation and unemployment was illusory, preserve the optimistic classical efficiency, price stability, and natural rate of unemployment. And thirdly, we will discuss which tenets of the Chicago School became the lasting contributions. The new classical ideas have already penetrated deeply into the curriculum of the United States University. For example, the Principle of Economics textbook have already chaptered into a new classical macroeconomic perspective, including discussion of a natural rate of unemployment, rational expectation, a long-run vertical Phillips curves, and a short-run versus long-run aggregate supply. The Chicago theories of human capital, household production, job search, and discrimination all are discussed within the textbook on the contemporary labor economies. The case of for flexible foreign exchange rate is standard fare in international economics textbook. The Coase theorem of externality is treated in textbook on public finance and environmental economics, and several ideas presented by the members of the Chicago School broadly defined appear likely to be the lasting value. And I would like to present the Chicago economist George J. Stingler, and I would like to introduce him by presenting his biographical detail. And George was born on the 17th January 1911 in the Seattle, Washington, in the United States. He graduated from the University of Washington in the 1931 with the Bachelor of Arts, and second year, which is in the 1931, he obtained the MBA in the Northwestern University. And in the 1981, he won a share of the Nobel Prize in Economic Science for his seminal studies of industrial structures, the functioning of market, the cause and effect of public regulation. And finally, He passed away on the 1st of December 1991 in the Chicago, Illinois, United States. And George is believed the information is an economic goods, and dealing with the uncertainty, he believed the individual would require additional information to guide the rational decision, and he believed the individual have the more information is better than less. Consumer decide how much the information to obtain by comparing the marginal benefit and the marginal cost. Marginal benefit is start with the high and fell down with the rapidly, and the marginal cost is start from the low and gradually increase. The optimal amount of the information is when the marginal benefit is same met with the marginal cost. Marginal benefit is the additional benefit arising from a unit increase in a particular activity. The marginal benefit decline when the consumer obtain more information about the products. And the meaning of the marginal cost is the cost added by producing an additional unit of a product or service. The utility sacrificed by delaying the purchase generally rises as a consumer obtains more of it. When the marginal benefit is bigger than the marginal cost, consumer will continue to seek additional information. When the consumer will stop seeking the additional information, it means that when he found out the marginal benefit is same with the marginal cost, consumer have obtained the optimal amount of the information. And George A. Arkeloff extend the Stigler analysis of information. Arkeloff asks, why does a new car lose so much a share when the buyer drive it off, sell a loss? If the physical depreciation is culprit, then why the same car sit for a week or even months are not losing value? Arkeloff answer, which earned him a share of the Nobel Prize in the 1991 in the economics, was that the some market contain asymmetric information. Here is the example of the asymmetric information. A consumer in a market for a car, a seller for a used car has a better information about the condition of their car to do prospective buyers. Information is not symmetric on both sides of the market because the buyer is lack of the information about the used car as an adverse selection problem emerge. The owner of defective car, or we call the layman, wish to sell their cars, but most of the owners of the high quality car of a same make, year or model did not. The result is that most used cars on the market are poorer quality than the same model that are not for sale, because the prospective used car buyers know that the demand for used car is reduced as is the market price. The low price of used car further reduce the incentive of people owning good used car to offer them for sale. Poor quality cars therefore tend to drive out high quality cars, and many potential welfare enhancing transactions do not occur. When a buyer drives a new car away from the dealership, the car immediately assumed has deemed the value assigned it in the layman market, even though the new car may be in a good condition. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Hou Yao and my metric number is 261386. So I'll be presenting about Robert E. Lucas Jr. He is one of the Chicago School economists, and his main contribution is towards rational expectation and also his aggregate supply analysis. So before we talk more about his contribution, let us talk a little bit about Robert E. Lucas Jr. His full name is Robert Emerson Lucas Jr. He was born in September 15, 1937 in Yakima, Washington, and he earned his bachelor and also PhD in University of Chicago. So he taught a little bit at Carnegie Mellon and before returning to University of Chicago in 1974. So he was influenced by Friedman and also Samuelson's foundation of economic analysis during his early graduate education, and he won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1995 for having developed the hypothesis of rational expectation and also thereby having transformed the macroeconomic analysis. So let's move on and talk more about rational expectation. So on rational expectation, Lucas says that the market participants will reflect on their past errors and they will use and process all available information in eliminating regularities in errors in predicting future price level changes. So whenever a government will undertake expansionary fiscal or monetary policies, all these users will just adjust their inflation expectation upwards because they know that all these policies will cause inflation. So you get resources and financial markets adjusting so such that their workers receive higher nominal wages, and also sellers of raw materials and other capital goods receive higher prices, and lenders receiving higher nominal interest. So all this reaction to expected inflation will render the expansionary fiscal or monetary policies ineffective. So we look back at this vertical long-run Phillips curve by Friedman. So instead of the temporary increase in profit and output and employment implied by the supposed move from A to B, you will get the economy move directly from A to C under rational expectation. And also expansionary fiscal and monetary policies will directly and immediately boost the rate of inflation from P1 to P2 upward along this vertical long-run Phillips curve. So for more comparison, Friedman's theory of the inflation and employment relationship is actually based on the assumption of adaptive expectation. So under this adaptive expectation, people will determine their expectation about future inflation based on past and present inflation, and it changed only as new events unfold. And under rational expectation developed by Lucas, people are said to be rational, and they will reflect on past error and also uses all available information, and this includes like any effects of the current fiscal and monetary policies such as demand pull inflation. So moving on, let's talk about Lucas aggregate supply analysis. It's an analysis distinguished between short run and long run aggregate supply. A quick summary of this analysis would be an unanticipated change in aggregate demand will affect the level of real output, but only temporarily. And in contrast, an anticipated change will not have effect on the real output and employment. Let's move on. So this would be the scenario if there's an unanticipated increase in aggregate demand. So suppose you have the economy initially at point A, and then you get an unexpected surge in investment spending, and it increases the aggregate demand from 81 to 82. So producers will immediately experience rising prices and conclude that these prices are rising relative to other prices and to prices of labor. So expecting higher profits, they will increase employment and also output, moving the economy from A to B. And then the short run aggregate supply curve you can see is upsloping, and the unanticipated price level increase from P1 to P2 will expand real output from Q1 to Q2. But in fact, all prices, including the price of labor and also other outputs, are rising due to the general increase in aggregate demand. So firms collectively experience rising costs, and short-run aggregate supply curve will eventually shift leftwards back to from AS1 back to AS2, and the economy will move from B to C, reversing the whole previous increase in output. So in the long run, the economy aggregate supply is simply the vertical line, ASLR, emanating upward from Q1 through the points such as A and C. So in contrast, in this figure is the scenario if there's an unanticipated decrease in aggregate demand. So initially, the firm would misperceive that the falling prices are confined to their own products only, and anticipating lower profits, they would reduce employment and also output, and the economy would move from A to D. And the firms would soon recognize, however, that all the prices are falling, including wages and also other input prices. So as nominal costs fall, the short-run aggregate supply curve would shift rightward from AS1 to AS3, and the economy would also move from D to E. And the real output expands from Q3 to Q1, the recession automatically ends. So Lucas says that the economy is actually self-correcting, like the classical economists thought. So for this reason, his theory is known as the new classical macroeconomics. So what happens when the changes in aggregate demand are anticipated is that the real output will stay constant. So we look back at the two figures just now. When there's an anticipated increase in aggregate demand, for example, let's say the central bank increased the money supply in order to expand the aggregate demand from 81 to 82. So because the Fed's action is public, so the inflationary outcome is anticipated, and firms would immediately recognize that the higher prices being received for their products are part of the general inflation they had anticipated. So they know that the same forces, the inflation that are rising their prices, is also raising their costs, so leaving their profits being unchanged. So the short run aggregate supply curve will shift leftward from AS1 to AS2 simultaneously with the rightward increase in aggregate demand from 81 to 82. So the economy moves directly from A to C on the long run aggregate supply curve ASLR. So the real outputs remains unchanged at Q1 and only inflation occurs. So the long run aggregate supply curve is the only relevant aggregate supply curve when increases and also decreases in aggregate demand are anticipated. So similarly, when the scenario is anticipated decrease in aggregate demand, let's say from 81 to 83, the economy just moves directly downward along the ASLR curve from A to E. So on a short conclusion on Robert E. Lucas Jr. is that the rational expectation being developed by him is nowadays very much a part of mainstream macroeconomics, but nevertheless you have a lot of macroeconomists rejecting this new classical proposition because of the automatic self-correction and also policy ineffectiveness. There's also a lot of debate on how closely his theory describes the true workings of modern and real economies. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Jia Choon. My matrix number is 261637. And now I'm going to present about the Milton Friedmans. Milton Friedmans have two important theories. One is consumption functions, one is monetary theories. Okay, now let us look at the biographics. As you can see from the slide, Milton Friedmans was born at 1912 and passed away in 2006. He was a leading figure in the Chicago Review, completed his undergraduate works at the Rutgers University and received his graduate degrees from the University of Chicago and Columbia University. In 1948, Friedman joined the faculty at the Chicago's and remained until his retirement in 1977. Later, he served as senior fellow at the Howard Institutions of Stanford University. He also is the president of the American Economic Association in 1967, and he also won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1976. Friedman's ideas are known to have a wide spectrum of American publics. As you can see more detail on the left side, or have provide a figure photo to about her life. Next, I'm going to talk about the consumption functions. Consumption functions is Milton Friedman's first theory. Consumption functions, Milton say that the Keynesian's consumption is too simple, and Milton believed that household consumption is determined by permanent income and not by current income. What's meant by permanent income? Permanent income is defined as expected long-term average income. It supposes that a person's consumption at a point in time is determined not just by their current income but also by the expected income in the future year. So next, Milton believed that people want to maintain a reasonably stable standard of living from now until the next year and the next year. So the household consumption did not respond to the every change in the income, unless the change in income that let the people view that it's permanent and long-lasting, like being fired for a job, and being promoted to the higher ranking options, or maybe the living style is different from now. So as a result, the MPC, marginal percentage to consume in the current income will be smaller than the Keynesian theory. Thus, the investment multiplier is smaller, implying that internal instability in the economy is overstated. As you can see, I have put on the next slide that how is the consumption functions difference between the Keynesians and the Milton's one. The standard Keynesian consumption function is represented by the line CK. The permanent income consumption function is denoted by the line CPY. CK is faster than the CPY. So, when the consumption will be higher relative to the current income when current income is below the permanent income, and the lower relative to current income when current income is above the permanent income. So next, this is the end of the consumption functions. I will talk about the monetary theories. In monetary theories, Milton has believed that he has no distinctions between type of the money. Like Keynesian, we have the transactions, we have the simplifications, but Milton just believed that people holding money because they demand cash balance because they are provide utilities to the holders. Like we need to use the money, so we hold it, not on any purpose. Like we will try to invest, try to saving. No, we just hold for to use. So, but he also said that there are three determinants that to let household of enterprise to hold the money for any given time. So we will discuss in the next slide. So the determinants is also the independent factor that influence the supply of the money. So let's move on the next slide. Okay, the demand of the money determine. Okay, the first determinants are the total wealth. As the total wealth or permanent income will increase, then the amount of money people desire to hold as cash balance will also increase. A simple idea, right? Like then when you have more income, then you have more wealth, then your permanent income increase, then you will hold more money because your income is increased. The second major determinant is the cost of holding money. In this point, we are linked to three type of point only. First of the cost is the holding money is direct by the interest rate. When we like we hold, like we store our money in the bank, but didn't given the interest rate. But when we have invest in the stock markets, bonds, property market, then we will have a good income, have a good return. So when the return of the stock, bonds or property markets have increased, so the opportunity cost of the holding money is also increased, and less people will be demanded for the money, so the less money will be demanded. So this is the constructions between the interest rate. Next, we're going to talk about another cost of holding money is the expected rate of inflation. Okay, this is how it works. This is the opportunity cost for capital gain in a real asset. Its returns sacrifice on asset that appreciates in the value. The higher expected rate of inflation enhance the purpose of the capital gains and thus increase this cost of holding money. Thus, people will reduce present cash when they expect higher inflation. Like when you buying house in 2010s, it costs only 1000k, but when you buy house in 2020, it's cost another 200k. So when people expected the housing of the price will always keep rising, then people will spend the money now to have a capital gain on the future in 2020. Okay, the final cost of the holding money is related to the price level, but this is not the same with the expected rate of the inflations. The higher the price level, the less the dominant cost of holding money, because each dollar or each ringgit help will be buy less. Increase in the price levels, how to measure? Measured by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. Cost proportions increase in amount of money demanded. People will desire to increase their cash balance to keep their constant in real terms. That is, they want to hold more cash to buy the higher price goods. The third one determinant is the preference. The preference is like what you like on the basics intuitions about the holding and using cash to buy the things you like. So it's the preference. In summary, Friedman say that the amount of the money demanded is very different from the permanent income and the price level. Inversely, with the expected rate of inflation and insignificantly with the change in the rate of interest. Okay, so another theories in the monetary theories is the modern theories of money. This is a quite interesting part. According to Friedman, the demand of the money is relatively stable in the short run. The Federal Reserve is the Fed in the USA. In our measure is Bank Negara Malaysia, BNM. The supply of money, an increase in supply of money will leave people hold less cash balance in asset amount that they want. Therefore, they will try to get off of the asset transactions asset by spending the cash or writing check or online banking. That means that when we have like extra cash, we will try to spend it, or we will try to buy anything, or buy a new car, buy a new house. But the community cannot get rid of itself, because one other people spending is leave more cash in other people's account. Thus, the attempt of by people to get rid of themselves of cash balance will drive up the demands of goods and services and increase the output. By increase the output, it will increase the price too. For some of the combination is in current sentence where the economy is operate in the nature level of employment and output, only price will rise over the long run. At the price level rise, demand for the money is increased because the community desire to hold additional money to buy a higher price. Eventually, equilibrium between the quantity money supplies and demand is restored, but in a higher price of level. It's like when we have extra money on hand, we will buy more car, more house. So the price of the house and car will increase, but our spending is other people's income. When we spend it, it will generate an extra balance in the income. Then the other people will spend it, spend it, and spend it. So it's like a circle. When it circles, when the demand is increased and the supplies also increase. So when supply and demand increase in the same time, the price level will increase and it will equivalent in the higher level or price level. So this is the Friedman's idea. Next, we will talk about the Friedman's long run vertical Philly curve. It shows that the combinations of the inflations and unemployment that are possible when the actual rate of inflations desire for the expected returns. When inflation is greater, the aspect such as a P2 is greater than P1, the unemployment temporarily falls below its natural level. UN to U1 as shown at the graph. But once P2 become the new expected rate, the short-run Philip curve shift from the SRPC1 to the SRPC2, and the rate of the unemployment returns to its natural level C. In the long run, there is no trade-off between the inflation and the unemployment rate. The long run physical curve is vertical, indicate that any one of the forward rate of inflation is competitive in the natural rate of the employment. So that's all for figments, and that's all for me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kah Yong, metric number 262713. Today, I would like to talk about Gary Asperger. Let me introduce him first. Gary Asperger was born at year 1930, which at the Posiville. He was graduated from the University of President in 1951, and he get his doctorate from University of Chicago in 1955 with a thesis called The Economy of Racial Discrimination. In year 1957 until year 1969, he was a professor at Columbia University. After that, he joined the Faculty of Chicago and as a professor of economy and sociology. He has been the president of American Economic Association in 1986. After that, Becker was likely to present his positive theory of economy rather than championing the policy perspective associated with Feldman and the Chicago School. In the mid of 1980, Becker began contribute column for Business Week, and this time he was increased his exposure to the broader public. In 1992, Becker was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economy. He had extended the economic approach with its combined assumption of maximized behavior, stable preference, and the market equilibrium into traditional domain of sociology, political science, law, sociology, biology, and anthropology. Unfortunately, Becker was died in Chicago at the year of 2014, which age of 83. So let's see that what theory introduced by the Gary Asperger. Gary Asperger talked about the investment in human capital. It can explain in this graph. In this graph, investigate either we should attend college or not. There are three areas in this graph, which is area 1, 2, and 3. Area 1 is about the direct cost for attend the college, such as the book or tuition. The area 2 is about the opportunity cost for attend the college. We know that if we go to the college, we can go to the work and earn the income. This is the opportunity cost for attend the college. And the area 3 is about the additional income after graduate from the college. So Gary Asperger said that investment in human capital occur only if the present value of area 3 is more than area 1 and 2. This method also can use in other way, such as a worker move to a new location to work, firm provide on-the-job training to his worker, developing nature to use resource to improve the general health to his workforce. After that, Gary Asperger also talked about theory on the family. This theory analyzes the allocation of time to children and to the market, marriage and divorce. Outreach is the addition to selfish in family. The first one is talk about the theory of merit. Merit is a division of labor and maximize their production. This is because the skill variation occur when different past experience and skill. After that, the marriage will cause the higher market wage opportunity because the households will shift to the consumption side. After that, Gary S. Baker talked about the fertility. Fertility in this theory is talk about the family, how many children produced by a family. We know that the children is costly because it needs a lot of expenditure. In this theory, say that there are three reasons affect the number of children produced. The first one is the cost for a child. If a cost for a child is high, means that there are low number of children. The second one is talk about the parent income. When their income is higher, means that they can feed more children. And third one is about the trade-off between quantity and quality of children. So the third theory in this theory is about the theory of altruism. Altruism actually is a theory of utility. In this theory, say that one member of the family utility is talk about the utility for one family member increase, it will increase other family member utility. When we apply with this theory, the selfishness can be avoided. A fourth is about the divorce. We know that the married partner is find the information and it is costly. Unfortunately, most of the time they are forced to marry with incomplete information, and the divorce may be the new ultimate decision after they find out more information. So we can see that the divorce was more likely occur in the early in the marriage rather than later. In conclusion, the Chicago School was began in year 1946 when the Milton Friedman joined the faculty at the University of Chicago. The main idea of Chicago is try to maintain, strengthen the classical, marginalist, and neoclassical traditional at the time which is diminishing policy by the King's Revolution. The major tenets of Chicago is optimizing behavior, also price and wage in general trend to be good approximate to their long-run competition one, mathematically orientation, rejection of kings, and limited government. In general, the Chicago School strong belief in market system which is laissez-faire because it will give a benefit to the society, especially for the corporate and high income group. Chicago School was very useful and correct in this time because of two reasons. The first one is about it helped to preserve the long legacy of classical, marginalist, and neoclassical microeconomic theory, where the King's macroeconomic revolution was dominate the intellectual scheme. The second one is talk about keeping alive the monetary field of Fisher during the period which is primarily during by the weight of King's idea. Even it is premature to judge, the Chicago theory will become the lasting contribution to economy, but new classical ideas such as discussion of a natural rate of unemployment, rational expectation, a long-run Philip curve, and short-run versus long-run aggregate supply have already penetrated deeply in the cycle of US university. That's all. Thank you.